welcome back to the Lost Minds podcast. This is episode 3 on the End the Two-Party System Network. My name's Emily.
And I'm Anthony.
And today we are going to be talking about imperialism and how that connects to the two-party system. And arguments as to why imperialism shows us why we need to end the two-party system.
So, we're also going to be talking about the Russia and Ukraine stuff. Try to lay that out. I think I put together a somewhat decent timeline of events and everything that's led up to it, and kind of just the setup and the context of why this is happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
To get more into the Russia-Ukraine situation, so that's the first thing we're going to be talking about today. So a little bit more backstory and context leading up to the current crisis and how it really ties into the need to end the two-party system, because the two parties have kind of been flip-flopping back and forth. It kind of just depends on who's in power at the time, because as we've talked about, they both serve the same entities. They both get paid by the same people to run for office. In the military industrial complex, this includes like weapons makers, like Raytheon, Boeing. There's Lockheed Martin. There's other ones. But yeah, each year they put billions of dollars into Congress, and we see a lot of times that they create crises and situations like this to justify to the American people why every year billions has to be added to the military budget. This is really no different. Where I started to really make the point of how the Democrats have kind of switched positions with the Republicans, it started in 2012. This was when the Republicans were more hawkish towards Russia. And an example, during the general election debate in 2012, Obama made a joke to Mitt Romney. He was mocking him, and correctly mocking him at the time, for viewing Russia as the world's biggest geopolitical threat. He said that they're the biggest threat to the world and to the United States. And Obama said the 1980s called and they want their foreign policy back. Ha ha. And wait, you'll like that. So then that got big publicity. Everybody was like laughing at it about it, and everybody was kind of in consensus that like Mitt Romney was just trying to do some like Red Scare BS, like McCarthyism kind of thing, because like I said, those powers that be, they make a lot of money when we're in this like Cold War kind of situation with Russia. Excuse me. And so that happens in 2014, though, when Obama was president. The United States, I believe it was the CIA, but either way, backed and supported a coup to overthrow Ukraine. Ukraine's at the time democratically elected government. The reason we know this is because there were documents leaked from, like, it was a state official and somebody in the U.S. military talking about these plans, talking about the need to have somebody in there that is sympathetic to the United States. So the reason that we did that was because the United States and other Western leaders have been violating a treaty made post-Cold War. They were basically, the treaty was, we promised that we weren't going to expand NATO into Eastern Europe because that's, getting closer to Russia, and Russia doesn't want that because, and we'll talk about this later, the reason that we would want to do a coup like this and have a puppet government in there is because they will finally agree to join NATO, not just through because there's kind of been this like unspoken agreement that like Ukraine's sympathetic to the West in NATO since like the 90s or whatever, but they're not a part of it. So they don't have, like, in NATO countries, we have nukes and missiles there pointed at like countries like Russia. And so if we get Ukraine, which is literally connected to Russia or right next to it, then we'd be able to go up to Russia's border and point nukes at them. If a country tried doing that with Mexico, we would lose our minds, you know? So that's kind of my reason for pointing that out is, one, Obama is a hypocrite. Not even a hypocrite, just a liar. Because he got that zinger out on Romney and then is doing the exact opposite 2 years later. And also, just all of these things is to point out this is really just a geopolitical strategy here, to further that the war machine, basically. If we're in a Cold War like we were for, like, what? Cold War was like 50 or 60 years the first time. They just want to get back to that. So the coup and NATO and the West getting closer and closer has really pissed off Putin. And since 2014, escalations between the United States and Russia really popped off. There was, of course, there's been sanctions, like, I mean, really, really harsh ones by both Obama and Trump, and now Biden. You remember Russiagate? Mm-hmm. That was a whole fiasco. That was just trying to cause a Red Scare so that you could make your political enemies basically shove them into a corner, so that into obscurity, because everybody thinks that they're some puppet or agent of the Kremlin or whatever they were saying at the time. It ended up being complete BS. I mean, I know there's some evidence that Russia and Putin were trying to do things to sway the election, but that's another hypocrisy thing where we overthrow elections all over the world all the time. We're doing it now. We're going to keep doing it. So that's not really a thing, I don't know, to beat the war drum over. It's a little ridiculous when you lie about your complicity in that action. So we've also ruined a lot of pipeline deals, which I'm not endorsing pipeline deals, obviously, because pipelines suck and they are murdering the world. But, you know, like, everybody said that Trump was some Putin puppet or Russian agent who was placed in there by Putin himself, but then he bombed Syria, and then, which Syria and Russia are allies. So that was like a middle finger. And then the other one was Trump got in and blocked a really big pipeline deal with Russia and Germany, I believe. So, yeah, I mean, just a lot of poking and prodding and pushing kind of to the limit. I don't know if you remember this, but in 2016, during a debate with Trump, Hillary, not ironically, but she seriously said that we should make Syria a no-fly zone, which, again, the reason that's insane, I mean, she's a psychopath for saying that, is because, like I said, Russia and Syria are allies. Guess who's going to be flying into Syria? Russian planes. If you make it a no-fly zone, then we shoot those down. Boom. It's not a Cold War anymore. It's not a proxy war. It's a hot war. And then the U.S. has also given Ukraine almost $3 billion in military aid since 2014. Biden alone has sent almost $1 billion since he's been president. We also send NATO and U.S. military trainers to Ukraine, which is another sign of, like, hey, we're here. We're right here. Like, try us, you know? So then Putin takes it upon himself, and I'm not endorsing this. I don't, going in and taking over a country isn't a good thing to do. but that's what he did because we've kind of been backing him into a corner, and that was his way of saying, yeah, we're not doing this anymore. I'm not negotiating with you people about this anymore. Like, you keep violating this treaty, you keep getting closer to our border, and you're going to point nuclear weapons right in our faces, basically from inside of our own country. So I just like to pose the question of, what, if you think about it from that context, how is the U.S. in the right at all in this situation? Like, at all. What right do we have to make any provocation of war or to point the finger? Like, I mean, this is gaslighting, right?
Yeah, I was gonna
the definition of it.
I was even gonna just go back off what you were saying, even with the hypocrisy of all these different things. Just even with our government, but also liberals and a lot of just regular people who I see on the internet that are so stressed out and are making again, I'm not saying anything good about Putin, but also like you said, we do this all the time to countries. We invade countries all the time. Mm-hmm. We're gonna get into that in a little bit, but it really is just showing how many people care. And now all you hear on the news right now is about Ukraine. If you're not supporting your Ukraine, you're canceled, and there's a huge social mob that comes after you. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't support Ukraine and shouldn't the people and not want the people to be experiencing what they're experiencing. I know that the Ukraine leader has some issues from what I've seen, but also, the people, what's happening there is sad, but also we do this to a lot of Black and brown countries all the time. And you never hear people talking about that. You'll never hear people holding others accountable for what's going on in Syria or Yemen or any of these other places, Afghanistan. You barely hear people talk about that. And now it's all everyone's up in arms about Ukraine. It's kind of becoming this more trendy topic to just it's kind of what BLM was in 2020. It's people put Black Lives Matter on their bio, but then didn't stick to actually holding cops accountable, holding our government accountable for protecting Black lives and for making Black people's lives much better economically. And the list goes on. People just got over that after the summer of 2020 because it was a trend. And if you weren't supporting the trend, then you would get, again, crucified by this social mob. And that's exactly what's happening right now. But it's also showing to me almost the racism of the government and also the racism of the people, especially liberals, and how much they care genuinely, when this happens to white people, a mostly white country, in comparison to supporting Hillary Clinton despite all the shit that she's done to Black and brown countries. So it just, I don't know, that just to me also points out the hypocrisy. I just wanted to add that because it really is a hypocritical thing for us to be doing. And no, we really don't have the moral high ground in this situation as a government or as people to really talk about this and want anything, to be happening. It's sad on both sides that we have sanctions against Russia that are hurting their people. And also there's actual hot war happening with Ukraine and their people. So it's sad on both fronts, but also we don't really get to say oh, Putin's evil, but vote Joe Biden. You don't really get to say that. And we're going to get in a little bit later about the Democratic Party and all of its imperialist history. But that just to me is the most hypocritical and honestly mildly racist thing about this whole situation from our side in supporting Ukraine.
Definitely. No, that's a good point to add. And I didn't even think about it like that. But yeah. So now the president of Ukraine, I didn't add this into the notes because I just read it yesterday or the day before, but Zelensky, I think is his last name. He's a complete asshole, authoritarian, right-wing guy who now he has banned socialist news networks in the country and has made
he's banned socialist political parties as well. The Progressive Socialist Party of Ukraine or whatever.
And then he also is making all of their media just one network kind of thing that's being run by the government, which that's awesome. What the hell? So yeah, he's a monster, but they are acting I see a lot of liberals doing this on Facebook, acting like he's a war hero. I've heard people call him that because what there's a picture of him in a bulletproof vest, like about to go fight in the war or something like that, which I'm sure was totally fake and he wasn't actually doing, but whatever. So Biden, like I said, he had sent additional military aid to Ukraine, and that's kind of what started this whole thing. Well, that's what Putin was responding to, because that was kind of the last straw. That and the sanctions that we gave Russia on top of that. So to summarize this, I would say is that this is happening because, like I said, the United States wants to start the Cold War again, so that both parties can serve and enrich the military-industrial complex. One of the arms of corruption that is a stranglehold on our government and our country. And this crisis is a response ultimately to the attempt of the West and NATO to put nukes on Russia's border. I mean, is that a good way, do you think? Is that a good summation of it? I know you were telling me you didn't know a lot about it, but
yeah,
does that seem like an objective way to kind of look at things?
Yeah, I think so.
This whole situation is insane.
Yeah.
And everybody's so misinformed about it. That's what's really been blowing my mind.
Well, that's what I like. It is really hard. Like, I really have a hard time, like, keeping up with foreign politics and, like, everything that's going on internationally, just because it seems like a lot of this stuff happens years in like, previously, and then it all comes to a head over long periods of time. So it's really hard. And then also you have, like, you can never really you can't really trust a lot of media sources. So it's really hard to know what's the truth and what's not, and what to believe and what not to believe, especially when it comes to foreign policy stuff, you know? So honestly, I want to give people the benefit of the doubt. I think a lot of people just aren't educated and honestly don't have the time to pay attention and read into everything that's going on. But also, just like it shouldn't be like some shock for people to tell you now to not listen to everything that you believe, or believe everything that you hear on the internet or on mainstream media.
The mainstream media is the problem here.
That's something that really sticks with me a lot, just in regards to anything like this Ukraine situation, foreign policy, domestic policy, everything that's been going on in the government. It's like a lot of people still really trust mainstream media, and it's kind of shocking, honestly, how people like still believe that, even with like what happened like in 2001, like just like so many different things that have happened over the course of time, that even people in our generation who have seen a lot of like disasters and experienced a lot of just like awful things happening in the world, that we would still be so naive to believing everything that the mainstream media says.
So let me just add on the possible outcomes that are going to happen with this and why. Because this is a crazy situation and it's a little scary now. So basically, Russia has a lot of allies, just like the United States does. There's Iran, there's Syria, there's Cuba is the main point that I'm getting at. Is still allied with Russia. So basically, Russia's going to try to do what the United States is doing to them and have nuclear weapons pointed at like every major city in America, but from like all angles is what I was reading at last night. And now Visa and MasterCard have pulled out of Russia, and China saw the opportunity, came in and linked its UnionPay to Russia's basically financial system. And so now we're basically pitting the world's biggest superpowers against the United States now, and then they're going to have allies surrounding us. And now a lot of European countries are scared to give money to Ukraine because, Russia's right in their neighborhood. So we're really alienating ourselves here, and we're kind of making it so that countries are going to have to pick sides now between the United States, Russia, and China. So I'm not saying World War III is going to happen, but we're setting it up for that, which is crazy because who even knows what that would look like in today's age with, drones and nukes and stuff. Like, we gon' that.
Yeah, that is really scary, honestly. I didn't really think that it was going to get to that point.
It's at that point. And now I just read, I'm on Richard Medhurst's Twitter, which is a really good way to keep up with everything. Y'all should follow him if you aren't already. But God, my phone sucks. 1 second. Basically, Europe gets a lot of its gas from Russia. So Putin's response to the sanctions that the West is doing is now he's demanding that the because the main currency all over the world is the dollar, the petrodollar to be exact. So now he's dropped that, and I think he made rubles, what they're called, the main currency in Russia, and now he's demanding that all of Europe pay for their gas that they get from Russia in rubles.
Oh shit.
So this stuff it's just getting really, really tense.
Yeah.
Too tense. And everybody should be really scared about this and uncomfortable. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really have any much more to add. That's kind of the situation.
Would you say, like,
up to now?
This is like a really random thing to talk about on top of this, but also with a lot of people talking about like gas. We were just talking about this last night, but like you paying extra for gas is not you like supporting Ukraine.
No, it's not.
Can we can you talk about that a little bit more? Like, because you said something really good last night about it. I just don't remember exactly.
So, a lot of people are making the excuse. Okay, so conservatives are wrongly saying that, or acting like Biden has like direct control of gas prices, basically, which is making liberals, because let's face it, both sides are just like
reactionary, want to get mad over something.
Right. They're just reactively or reflexively defending whatever side they view themselves on. So they're saying, no, the president has nothing to do with the gas prices. This is nothing to do with Biden, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's where, you're wrong, because a lot of times the gas prices will go up because of like political instability and, crisis like this. And it's kind of, I don't know the exact mechanization of it, but I know partly it has to do with strategy on who controls the countries that do control the gas prices. Because, right, I mean, it's the perfect time to make it go up like crazy, because it is that there is that level of instability and like crisis going on right now. And so, yeah, a president can cause those things to happen that does lead to gas prices going up like this.
Yeah.
But not.
I just wanted to
headaches. They give me headaches.
I wanted to also like mention that it really does show like a lot of liberals, like class bias, because they will do this thing where, like, especially recently, they're like, "Oh my gosh, like you feel like you're so oppressed because you have to pay $7 for gas." It's like, yeah, that like single mother. Like, yeah, definitely can't afford $7 in gas to go to work. Like, yeah, that's the thing, is like it really does show people's like true sides, and really does show their true nature, because even people that I know that are just self-describe themselves as like socialists or very like progressive are like saying that kind of stuff. And I'm just like, I understand, like you said, like they're really just doing that whole team politics thing where like, oh, you're wrong because you think that it's all Biden's fault, and oh, well, you're wrong because you think that Biden's like a saint. It's like they go back and forth, but ultimately this really does have an impact on people in our country as well, and it is having an impact, and we should be totally mindful of that and not like treat people like they're wrong, or they should feel like, feel bad about themselves for not supporting Ukraine, or for like, oh my gosh, like, can you imagine being as oppressed as people in Ukraine right now and you're complaining about gas? It's like, yeah, like we're not doing great over here either. So adding on high gas prices is not going to make anything better. Like, it's just going to put people in a worse hole.
And they're not helping the people in Ukraine by purposely being misinformed and then regurgitating these talking points that are kind of fed to them by the establishment and the media.
It's really the thing of like, I think a lot of people don't want to take accountability for the actions that they've had, they've been a part of. Like for me, I used to tell a lot of people, support Bernie Sanders, support like progressives in the Democratic Party. I had to change my mind when presented with new information and also take accountability for the fact that like I was wrong. I didn't realize that Bernie Sanders, I didn't realize it at the time. I told people to vote for Bernie Sanders. I pushed people more to the left. I pushed a lot of my friends to the left and people on my Facebook and acquaintances and family. But it's really at the point where I think a lot of people just don't want to admit that they were wrong about Joe Biden, and they don't want to look stupid for telling people to vote for Joe Biden. So regardless, anything that happens, they're going to support that Joe Biden does because it doesn't matter. It's their ego over the truth. And that's the most frustrating part for me is it's like, dismantle your ego a little bit, or at least befriend it and know when to use it. Cause this is not the time to use your ego in a situation. In politics really never is a time to use your ego in like those situations. No. But that's just, I thought that was really frustrating to me. And I've been seeing a lot of conversation about gas prices, which I know is not the biggest, most important thing in this Russia-Ukraine topic, but also
it's a big
is valid, I feel like, to talk about as like a leftist podcast that like, one, people here are hurting because of it. Two, it does have something to do with Joe Biden. And like, three, liberals are just kind of trying to be reactionary on purpose because technically, like, you're right. Like conservatives aren't completely correct that the president just directly controls gas prices, but also they're not like wrong.
No.
So it's like, I don't know. It's a really stressful situation to be a part of. And you're just these kind of situations really show you who is ready to come out with their true nature or not, because not only does it show like their like loyalty to a certain political party, but it also shows you how class loyal they are and how willing they are to throw vulnerable people here under the bus because they want to look okay for supporting something and for telling people to vote for someone who's doing something awful.
Be better, liberals. Be better. You and your college degrees and and all the time that you got.
Yeah, that's a lot of it. That really is a lot of it. Is that a lot of people that I see talking about it are people that I went to like college with because they really do feel like they have, like they could have freaking majored in event management. And they're like, oh my god, I'm such an expert.
There's going to be a liberal who's like, I don't have a college degree, and I agree with everything that we're saying right now. Like. I know. It's just a general.
It's just
but like you're supposed to be on face value.
Very true.
The intellectuals.
It is
and
very
you act
true.
like idiots.
A lot of Brianna Joy Gray did an episode about this recently too, about how in a lot of like college spaces, there's a lot of white people who feel like they have the moral high ground over others, especially specifically white students. And a lot of what I'm seeing is from white students that I used to go to school with, about being like comments that are very class loyal and very against poor people, even if they don't even realize it. It definitely is. So you see that a lot because they really want to act like they have the moral high ground on something, but they're not principled on any issue at all. And it was about that episode of that Brianna Joy Gray did was about race, and it was a good episode. But that just kind of, it does go hand in hand. I'm not saying that all college students are like that, because obviously I went to college and I'm not like that. But
liberals are like that.
A lot of liberals are, all liberals are like that. I just feel like this is one other time, and I think I wanted us to do an episode on this later on, just about our like reactions and I guess like predictions of like where the left is going in relation to the electoral politics and this like inside game, outside game strategy. But also just like why we feel like people are holding on to the two-party system so much, because we've had this conversation before on our own channel, but I think having a isolated conversation about it would be really good. And this is just one example of people being so unwilling to change their mind when they're presented with new information, and also admitting when you're wrong. Like, it's totally okay, especially when it comes to political stuff. Like, it's totally okay to admit that you're wrong sometimes.
It's totally okay to
or that you don't know anything about the situation. Like, I've been very clear that I don't know a lot about the Ukraine situation because it confuses me a little bit. So, like, you just gotta, like, be honest and be like, I don't have enough information to give an opinion on this. And leave it to people who have a more valuable opinion about it.
And again, I'm not saying that Putin's a good guy. I've heard of things that he's done. He's terrible. But he's no different than any president that we've had. And I'm
like
sorry.
a lot of world
He just
leaders
has
are
way
not
bigger of a
good
stranglehold on his country than like presidents they wish they had Putin's power. They see how authoritarian he is in his own country and how he wins elections with like 85% of the vote, which isn't a thing that ever happens. But they're like, damn, he's so mean and he's such an asshole. But really behind the scenes, they're like, man, he's cool. I'm kind of jealous of that guy.
Yeah.
I promise you.
Yeah.
Like this whole situation is basically just a bunch of old men that are, and women too, because I'm sure there's women world leaders that are in the West that are totally okay with everything that's happening.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of old elitist people with power and positions of authority that are just playing geopolitical chess. They don't give a shit what happens to the people in Ukraine. They don't even care what happens to us, dude. They don't. As long as this stage can be set to where every year they can come and say, we need $100 billion more for the military budget because Russia is doing this and Russia's doing that, and they're getting closer to America. We got to protect our borders. People are going to fall for that if we're in this crisis all the time, which is kind of manufactured by the United States.
Yeah, a lot of crises are manufactured in some way or another.
And that's my TED Talk.
Thank you for coming to our TED Talk. Okay, so are you ready to transition into another story or kind of a different perspective of this? We wanted to get into a little bit about like imperialism as a whole, and also the idea of like lesser two evils voting, at the two-party system. All this kind of stuff connects, and imperialism is something that I think, especially for the Democratic Party, is very blatant. Like, you can see that the Democratic Party is extremely imperialist, and a lot of people, I think that people try to like obfuscate from that, but unsuccessfully, because it is so blatant that they're not any better than Republicans, that it's just it's difficult to do. Were you gonna say something?
I do have one more thing to say about the Russia and Ukraine thing. The main tie-in that makes this about the two-party system and the need to end it, which is the main point of why we're putting it on this network, is that we've created a situation where, like I said, the parties are flip-flopping, but now we made it to where it doesn't matter if a Republican's in office or if a Democrat's in office. But now in the future, they're going to have the same exact stance on Russia, because now we've made them like our mortal enemy. Like, it's the responsibility of an American to be against Russia at this point, morally and ethically and whatever the hell.
Right.
So now, like, it's going to get even worse, and we're even more screwed in this situation because of the two-party system and how in cahoots they are.
Yeah.
Because they have the same boss.
And we also need to, just as people, break the cycle of getting so tribalistic about certain issues and like having these social mobs over certain issues. There are like really basic things that you should be for and against. I'm not saying that we couldn't have a litmus test over some issues, but like, you need to know when it's, like you said, when your emotions are being manufactured and used against you and weaponized against you. You need to be able to learn the difference between those two.
This is the same government that bombs weddings and bombs hospitals and kills children on a daily basis. If not every other day, we're doing it. You're really going to trust what that government comes and tells you about the second biggest world power in the freaking world? Like, just think about things like that. Instead of in this viewpoint, from this lens constantly of, I have to be on this side because these people that I don't like or that I find repulsive and annoying are on that side. No, dude. No.
Listen to more independent media. Like, you mentioned Richard Medhurst and like Revolutionary Blackout
He's
Network.
been the best.
They've done a few episodes on it, but
Richard Medhurst has been the best in my opinion, because he's doing it daily.
Yeah,
every single day. And
Richard Medhurst mostly does like a lot of foreign policy stuff. So if you're like ever really interested in that, definitely check out his channel. I think Revolutionary Blackout Network is really good in their like international leftist coalition panels and whatever. So they've talked about it a few times, and they're just a good channel in general to follow if you're a leftist and you want to learn more about stuff from
Definitely.
like a perspective of like Black leftists, or also just, you know, domestic stuff as well, not even just foreign policy. But yeah, so just, you know, listen to independent media. Stop listening to everything that the internet or mainstream media says. Don't believe it. You know, just do your own research and hear a bunch of different perspectives, especially on issues like this, because it really can get confusing and complicated. And that's the issues that you really do want to pay attention to a lot more. Cool. So yeah, we definitely think that, like, obviously the Ukraine and like Russia situation does tie into imperialism, not just like from Russia invading Ukraine, but also our actions in the situation. And we wanted to talk about imperialism in the terms of like the lesser of two evils, electoral politics, all these things that we're told every 4 years, and kind of how it gets brought up in the two-party system. So I found an article and it was published in April of 2020. So I'm going to be reading a few quotes from this because I feel like it really sums it up nicely. And then if you want to have any reactions to it or anything, I would love that, because it's a really good, you know, just article I think we both can react to. But it's called The Democrats, and we're going to be using this from a perspective of both Democrats and Republicans. But we've said this on this channel before, that the Democrats are more aligned with our like side, I guess. So
on the surface level, they're supposed to be. So, they're not actually, but they're supposed to.
We are going to be talking mostly about that. And also the Democrats, in a lot of people's eyes, are seen as like the yeah, just like the better party, I guess, the lesser of two evils. So yeah, it's called Bloodstained Party, the Democrats, a bloodstained party of imperialism, war, and oppression, which is also the title of this video. So we really want to focus on this article as the overall message of this video. Obviously, the Ukraine and Russia story has a part in it, but it talks a lot about like the lesser of two evils, the fact that the two parties are two wings of the same capitalist party, and that neither of them are the lesser evil of each other. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and read some quotes off from this, and it really does put everything that we just talked about into perspective. And then if you want to pick a quote or just react to it, we can from there. So yeah, here we go. So it says, the truth is that the Democrats are not the party of lesser evil, and its roots are far from progressive. It is not an ally of labor and the oppressed, and it never was. The Democratic Party is the other party of the Anglo-American ruling class. It is a party that enforces mass incarceration, mass deportations, wage imperialist wars, and supports bloody dictatorships abroad. This is what the Democratic Party is, a capitalist imperialist party. So just comes right out and says it. And the author too,
I wanted so far.
I'm not gonna actually say their name, but I'll put the cover page of this article up on the screen so that y'all can see the name of the author as well and see about the article. If you want to look it up, I'll have it posted in the description too. But okay, so it goes on to say, let's not forget that this is the party that waged criminal wars against Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and Serbia. Going back further, it was the party that started the horrendous wars in Vietnam and Korea. Both of those wars resulted in millions of deaths. The carpet bombing of North Korea destroyed whole cities and towns, killing around 15% of the population. The Democratic Party carried out the failed Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba under, I almost said Canada.
I kind of wish. Oh my God.
Oh God. Okay. The failed Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba under John F. Kennedy. It is the party that purposely bombed civilians in Germany and Japan, first under Roosevelt and then under Truman. It is the party that dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan, the only time nuclear weapons have been used in war. If we go back further, the Wilson administration twice invaded Mexico during the Mexican Revolution, invaded Haiti in 1915, and the Dominican Republic in 1916. This party has a long history of supporting bloody dictatorships abroad. And then it says, they give a few examples, supported the military dictatorship of Somoza in Nicaragua, various dictatorships in El Salvador, and it kind of goes on to list a few more. And it says, every single Democratic president, along with their Republican peers, has supported dictatorships abroad. They have armed and financed the Israeli apartheid state since its foundation, making possible over half a century of oppression of the Palestinian people. And let's not forget that Bernie Sanders has for decades, also supported Israel and voted to finance its military. He voted for a Senate bill in 2017 that said that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. He stated in 2017 that he was against the BDS movement and he was against Palestinians and the occupied territories having the same rights as Israelis because it would be the end of the state of Israel. As Sanders put it himself, he is 100% pro-Israel. So that just points out the progressive part of the Democratic Party as well. And then it goes on to say it was the Obama administration that materially supported the genocidal war of Saudi Arabia against the people of Yemen. Over 12,000 Yemeni civilians have died in military attacks during this war. Over 130,000 have died as a result of starvation that has resulted from the Saudi blockade of Yemen and their destruction of the country's infrastructure. On top of this, half of the population now lacks access to clean drinking water, and hundreds of thousands of children are suffering from malnutrition. This was all made possible by the support of both Democrats and Republicans, especially the administration of the Nobel Peace Prize winner, Barack Obama. The second paragraph is called Not the Lesser Evil, and it just goes on to explain a few more instances of this. And this kind of goes into the history of the Democrats' part in imperialism. So it says, this is the party that in Congress has supported the depredations of U.S. imperialism. The Democrats in Congress have backed the continuing sanctions against Iran, Russia, Venezuela, and most recently Nicaragua. Even Bernie Sanders, the champion of progressive Democrats, is also guilty of supporting U.S. imperialism. He voted for Clinton's war against Serbia in the 90s, for more sanctions against Iraq, and for the U.S.-led regime change there in 1998. He voted for the 2001 U.S. invasion of Afghanistan, and he has stated his intention to continue to use drone strikes against terrorists if elected president. So that just goes on to explain again more of the progressive part of the Democratic Party and their part in imperialism. And then it goes on to say the Democrats have been responsible for the deaths of millions of people throughout the world over the last century. They have taken part of the plunder of Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East, using the profits to strengthen the ability of U.S. capitalists to rule over the multiracial workers and oppressed here. Wars which were started by Democrats have been continued by Republicans and vice versa. Alongside the Republicans, the Democrats have taken part in carrying out the oppression and exploitation of Black, brown, immigrant, and poor people in the U.S. They continue the same general policy approaches, whether it be increasing incarceration, cutting welfare, detaining and deporting immigrants, or enabling Black police violence. The reason for this is that both parties serve the capitalist class. Both exist to maintain the system, pitting them directly against the interests of the working class and oppressed people across the globe. In fact, history shows that they have actually deported more people, the Democrats, incarcerated as many people, and waged as many wars, and are responsible for as many deaths as Republicans. Finally, it says it is not possible to separate one's support for the candidates in the Democratic Party without also coming to terms with and accepting what the party has actually done when it has been in power and what it is currently happening in the world as a result of this party's support for its existing policies. This article ends with talking about the working class needing its own party, and I'm going to stop there, but I think this is a great way to discuss this topic and just gives a lot of really great examples of it. So yeah, That's that. Do you want to comment on any of these?
Yeah, I would love to give a quote that Malcolm X said that kind of summarizes the two-party system and the problem that, well, I guess if anybody were to ask, why do you guys talk about Democrats so much? It seems like you don't really care about what Republicans do. Well, we do, but they do the same thing. But listen to this quote. It says, a fox is always more dangerous in the forest than the wolf. You can see the wolf coming, you know what he's up to, but the fox will fool you. He comes at you with his mouth shaped in such a way that even though you see his teeth, you think he's smiling and take him for a friend. So what the point of that is that the Republican Party is the wolf. They're the beast that, you know, can eat your throat out. But the fox is cute and looks pretty. So when it comes up to you, you're like, oh my God, that's my friend. And then it's going to rip your throat out anyway when you're not expecting it. That's what the Democrats do. So, yeah, no. I knew a lot of that. But even the stuff that I didn't know doesn't shock me. I think if you are shocked, then you haven't really been paying attention. So
yeah. Or you just really don't have the ability to pay attention, because a lot of like working people don't have the ability to pay attention, but a lot of people do. Like if you're commenting on these things and you are so wildly off of these topics, then yeah, like you kind of do have to take responsibility for that. And that kind of goes back to what I said before of like, sometimes you just have to admit when you're wrong, or when you were misunderstanding a situation, or even if you were right at the moment. Like, do I think it was wrong for me to suggest that people vote for Bernie Sanders out of any of the other candidates? Not necessarily. Would I have yeah, like right. Like would I now go back and tell people to vote with third party? Absolutely. But also, at the time that felt right to me, but I also was presented with new information, and so I changed my mind on that situation and acknowledged that I was wrong.
Yeah, you have to have something like that happen to be to where you're at today.
So that just really gives examples of the Democratic Party. But the overall message is that neither of these parties are the lesser of two evils, the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. It talks about how, the Democrats continue wars that Republicans did and vice versa. Neither of these parties are have the interest of people globally or here at home in mind. Which is why we named the episode that they're bloodstained parties of imperialism, war, and oppression, because they are. Those give examples, but also it talks about like the lesser of two evils and the concept behind that. So I wanted us to chat about that a little bit more too, of like, how do people come to these conclusions to think that these parties are the lesser of two evils almost,
Well, there's a lot of that is the media. I'd say that's probably the main thing, because I mean, look at what happened with Bush and the transition to Obama. Everybody hated Bush so much that he wasn't even showing up in public for like the last 6 months of his term or whatever. So Obama comes in and the entire country's like, oh my God, hope and change, hope and change. It was almost to a point where everybody was like, oh, we don't have to worry about what the president's doing anymore with this guy because he's our friend. Well, Obama used that, and the establishment and the Democratic Party used that. And it's also the ratchet effect. Bush came in and was cruel and was very openly and brazenly hawkish and over the top with the religion thing that turned a lot of people off too, because it kind of seemed like he was like very theocratic and authoritarian. So then he kind of sets the stage up for like, okay, I did all of this really bad shit that everybody hates, and everybody hates me. So now the next guy who comes in, especially if he's like a darling in the public like Obama was at the time, he has all of this room basically to do this evil stuff that the guy before did. But now you have a prettier face on. I think that's the main reason people come to these conclusions, is because the Democrats they team up with the media to really paint themselves better. And it's like that's what they use the social issues for. They use identity politics for that as well. Republicans are just like, no, like, we're against gay marriage. We don't give a shit about black and brown people. Even if the Democrats feel the same way, which they do at the end of the day, they aren't out there spouting that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it has something to do with the mainstream media and the ratchet effect and all the things we talked about in the last episode. But I also feel like it has something to do with these social organizations that a lot of people believe in nowadays too. And the author talks about this as well in the article. But like DSA and the Party for Socialism and Liberation, they credit Bernie Sanders a lot of times, and even like just leftists who are now independents who don't belong to either of these organizations or parties credit Bernie Sanders as waking a lot of people up to socialism. And while that may be true in some instances, it was already there. Like, you can't convince people to support a certain type of party or have a certain ideology unless it's already planted in them that they are miserable, that this system isn't working for them, and that they're ready for a change. So really what it is that this country has pushed so many people to misery that it was easy for Bernie Sanders to do so. And Bernie Sanders does have a very sticky track record on some issues. And I think that it was easy for people to forget that because we've had trust. We are so, especially since 2016 and Bernie lost, I think over that period of time where we now had like the squad members entering in 2018, like we really were so beginning to get so miserable. And so many people started paying attention to politics in 2016 that we started latching on to organizations like DSA. We started latching on to politicians that were going to be our saviors, like the squad and Bernie Sanders, as a sense of hope, as a sense of not feeling like maybe this misery is going to end at some point very soon. And unfortunately, I feel like that is kind of what pushes people into the Democratic Party more. I feel like I blame more of progressive Democrats than I do centrist Democrats for continuing the two-party system because of the tricks that they play on people and also the social organizations that continue to do so. That's why I admire, March for Medicare for All that doesn't support certain politicians and is very open about that, who just don't work with politicians in general. I appreciate, even in my own statewide Medicare for All organization, I'm trying to push us away from building relationships with politicians because we've been so conditioned to do so and to beg for them to do something for us. It's really pathetic, honestly, that whole strategy. And it's very like undignifying. It's very dehumanizing to beg for people to actually care about your livelihood. People who are supposed to do it as their job. And so I think a lot of these social organizations, you get involved with them, especially after 2 years of a pandemic too, in 2020. A lot of people got involved because you were in isolation. Like there was nothing else to do. You wanted to feel a sense of connection and community. And I think that capitalism has, dwindled and like dismantled our systems of community so much and isolated us so much and got us based in such individualism that we're latching on to any sense of community that we can find, whether it's in politicians or in social groups or whatever that may be. But that's such a dangerous route to go on because it really does cause you to not be principled about these issues, to not be so like clear-headed when it comes to police violence and state violence and imperialism and poverty and all these different things when it comes from the community that you are supposed to trust and that you've entrusted in. A lot of people have entrusted in Joe Biden because they didn't like Trump, or entrusted in Bernie Sanders to do the thing, entrusted in the squad to do the thing, and they're not being principled on these issues. So I think it causes them to completely continue to go back into the system. And I think genuinely people have a hard time with admitting and dismantling their ego and just admitting, I was presented with new information and I've changed my mind on that thing. And I'm sorry that I was wrong. And I'm going to be principled on this issue at this point now. And like I said, I think that shows where a lot of people's class loyalty comes from and even race loyalty comes from. I think a lot of people, especially Democrats and leftists, are afraid to admit that they have some biases that they need to check themselves on. And that's just the unfortunate reality of the situation. But I think it is a combination of the mainstream media, like you said, but also like a lot of these social organizations, because a lot of them really have taken advantage of people and taken advantage of people's misery. Yeah, like they've taken advantage of people's misery and like oppression and then just, taken it and ran with it. So, and sheep herded people into this two-party system. So that would be my input as well on it.
Yeah, and it's hard for people to, I mean, that goes to the main point, not the main point, but one of the main points that I hear you talk about that I agree with a lot is don't trust or put in a lot of your spirit and care into politicians and public servants. Because once you start seeing the writing on the wall that they aren't really doing things for your best interest, well, now it's like, it's hard for people to get rid of that because it's like, well, I just put everything that I had into this. What do you mean I have to reverse course now? Like, I think that is a thing.
Well, it's really
hurts people.
It's a long-term strategy if you really think about it. Because like I said, capitalism as a like system teaches us to be very individualistic, to not trust other people, to not have communities with each other, to not have any sort of trust within each other. So then they continue to like beat that into people over time and propagandize people into that individualistic mindset. And then they throw in, because again, this is where like the rotating villain comes in and the ratchet effect comes in, and how progressives are just willing parties in this whole game,
Yeah.
because they know what their role is. They know that their role is to be thrown in to give that hope, that savior complex to the people who are so miserable and so oppressed and so vulnerable and beaten down, that it continues that individualistic idea of like, I can't trust my fellow organizer, I can't trust my fellow coworker, my neighbor, I have to trust Bernie Sanders, I have to trust AOC, I have to trust all, DSA to do the thing. We're not trusting in each other, even as communities, to just take care of each other, to do things for each other, to practice mutual aid, to get out on the streets, to do any of this stuff. We're taught, it really is a beautiful long-term ingenious strategy.
It is
in relation to capitalism and this electoral politics strategy.
Well, also imperialism too, because if you take away, like if you erode and rot away people's principles at home, then what you think I give a shit that we're bombing some poor brown country? Like, yeah, it is pretty genius.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. It's a whole, like, when you really think about all these things, like, it doesn't really seem like a conspiracy theory anymore,
well, like, I mean, we've dehumanized homeless people.
Yeah.
Dehumanized the mentally ill, the disabled, so that when you hear, if you somehow hear that like we killed like 10 innocent civilians in a country that you barely understand, you don't know the culture, you don't, and it like it goes like you already have groups of people that are dehumanized in your head, so
yeah,
it's just easier it makes it easier for them to do it with those people, because they're terrorists or they're a threat to you somehow, and you're like, well, okay.
And white people still are the major source of power in this country. We still hold the majority in a lot of different aspects, especially economically, and that controls a lot of different things in our society. So when of course, white people aren't going to look at a brown country or a black country and say, oh yeah, like, we totally care about this issue, let's support them just as much as we are Ukraine. But of course, we look at Ukraine, who again is a majority white country, and we're fawning over it and we're freaking out. And it's like, and not, like I said, not that the Ukraine people don't deserve that, but everyone deserves that. That's the point. And it is so hypocritical to not be principled on that issue. But again, it's that like picking sides, team politics type strategy that people have towards things nowadays. And litmus tests are okay. I'm in support of litmus tests in a general sense, but like not when it comes to weaponizing my own emotions. If you're going to weaponize my emotions against me or against my fellow people, then like, yeah, no, like I'm more aware and awake to that. And I think people have to start being more awake to when their emotions are being weaponized against them and weaponized towards other people too. So yeah, I think that's a really good culmination of it. But there's one more quote that I wanted to take from this article, and I also wanted to give a little bit of information on the author, because I just saw this little point in the end of the article too that I think is cool. It says, this is the very last paragraph in the article, and the big overarching topic here is history and repeat. So it says, supporting such horrible crimes is what happens when someone works to support a party dedicated to the existence of capitalism and securing the profits of the imperialists at home and abroad. The leftists currently working to support the Democrats should learn from this history. If they continue down the road, they will also end up abandoning the fight against racial oppression, imperialist war, cop terror, and many other evils of the society. They will also end up minimizing or ignoring the crimes of the Democrats in order to make their candidates more electable. When they go down this path, they will be on the side of the enemies of the working class and the oppressed. So I think that that's a really good summary of that as well, just because, like I said before, a lot of people who I know that self-identify and proclaim themselves as leftists and like really morally right people who are on the side of like people that, vulnerable people, marginalized people, are now supporting war. And so it just shows you how like unprincipled these people are when you start bringing in this like team party politics. And that's the dangers of the two-party system. And that's really what the big kind of overarching message also of like why we need to end the two-party system. It really does create this like tribalistic, like only two sides, my team versus your team kind of dynamic. And it causes people to be unprincipled on these issues. So I thought that was a really good summary of everything. Do you have anything to add?
I do not.
Cool. This has been a really good episode. I wanted to mention, again, I'm not going to try to say the author's name because I don't want to mess it up. This article was also updated in January of 2022, so it's very recent as well. So yes, it was published in 2020, but this is also a very recently updated article. I wanted to clarify that because I know a lot of people try to debunk articles who have been out for so many periods of time. So I wanted to add that in. And the author, it says that they grew up in a rural area in California, raised by Mexican parents who were agricultural workers, and that he continues to work and organize his community and is dedicated to social change and collaborating with others who want to fight for liberation for all of the oppressed. So if I can find his social media, I'll put his name in the comments and everything, but if I can find his social media or anything, y'all should definitely follow him because he wrote a fantastic article, fantastic message.
Yeah, that was really good.
So yeah, I really like that. I'll link the article as well so that y'all can read it and share it with your peers. But yeah, imperialism, it's such a huge topic and it's a very complex topic, which is why I struggle with it a lot.
Yeah.
But it is very important to talk about, and it's also such a main common thread. A lot of issues and topics are a common thread between the two parties. But it's one of the things with the Democratic parties that is just so blatant and in your face that you can't deny it.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to talk about that, especially in relation to what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. And yeah, I think the main message here is that, again, as we've always said, like, we need to end the two-party system. It's creating this really unprincipled, really immoral, like, faction of society, and just continuing to build upon and imperialism, like the article said, is really just the highest form of capitalism. And capitalism forces us to be so individualistic and just, yeah, one-track minded. So we really need to end it all and dismantle it all and bring in different perspectives and different viewpoints, not just, as we always say, in third parties, but also in direct action, mutual aid. We need to start trusting each other in our communities again. Go out and talk to your neighbors, donate to your, community, do things for your community. It's so important. And every single time you do something, even simple like that, like introducing yourself to your neighbor or introducing yourself as like the friendly communist on the block, like, you are making a change. You are fighting against capitalism. You are being the disruptor in all of this. So do those things. And especially when it gets nice outside, like, talk to the people around you and, do more things like that.
Dude, have a cookout, have a barbecue, invite your neighbors over.
Yes.
Make a steak or a burger or something.
That's the thing.
That's the best way to break bread with people.
Yes. We always come back to mutual aid in our episodes. So I think I've forgotten the last few episodes. I'm actually going to try to post some mutual aid links below for y'all. Definitely support, like, one of them that we love is Tour for the Poor. And that's like based in Michigan, but the concept too, and you just mentioned cookouts, so I wanted to talk about it, was that he like actually feeds and clothes people. And the idea is that if you give people their basic needs, they're more able to talk about these issues and really understand, like, oh, this one person is literally giving me stuff. Like, this is what our lives can look like under communism, under socialism, So he really helps to make these connections to people when he goes out there and clothes them and feeds them. He actually has conversations about communism with them. And it's a really cool concept. So
we have to send a Hail Mary DM. Get Rome on the show.
To Rome.
Seriously. No, I'm gonna draft something up tonight. I'm gonna send it because he's very busy. But that would be such a cool opportunity to get the inside information on what doing this is like and why he's doing it. And also, he's just freaking awesome.
But if y'all also check out the Revolutionary Blackout Network, Rome is on that network, and also a ton of other great activists who also have mutual aid networks and are doing a lot of great stuff in their own communities. I think like Compton J is in Skid Row doing mutual aid. So Finney was on it, but is no longer and does stuff in DC. So, lots of great folks there that can also give you some perspectives on that. And they also just did a third party summit about like third parties and ending the two-party system. So y'all should go check that out as well.
Yes.
Anyway, all the links will be left down in the description for y'all. And we really appreciate you for tuning in. As always.
Thank you everybody so much that watches and leaves comments. Dude, the comment section in the last couple of videos warms my heart.
Yeah.
Makes me feel good.
It's very energizing.
It makes you like want to create content. Especially when people are like, "Hey, I'm really digging this." It's like, "Oh my god, I got to give you more now."
Yeah.
And it makes it fun. It makes it cool.
We were off last week from a few family situations. So we're happy to be back. We're going to be back next week. Typically we'll be posting on Thursdays is when I try to have a video up for everyone. So keep an eye out next Thursday. Also for our next video, let us know any topics that you want us to cover. Any people you want us to talk to. Let us know some feedback, what you like, what you don't like.
Also check out the Lost Minds podcast because
check us out on our own channel.
We'll be doing different videos over there as well.
Yep. Getting back into the swing of things. Yeah. We had, like I said, we had a lot of family situations happening for a few months. So that kind of got us off track, but we will be uploading on our own channel again very soon. And we do a lot more current news stories on that channel. So yeah, if you want to hear more everyday, what's going on, kind of stories, check us out over there. Be sure to check out the other, shows on this channel as well on the network. They are great as well. We had a new channel come on this past week, so go check all of that out. And yeah, we will see you guys in the next episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the network, and follow us on social media, and we will see you next week.
Heck yeah.
Thanks, y'all.
Love y'all.
Bye.